Oh, it's just me today.
Just you.
My other person had an emergency.
Oh no. Hope everything's all right.
I do to be down.
Right. Let everybody in. Can I see the participant list? Okay. It.
Let's see.
Um, okay, everybody's coming in. All right, we are good to go now. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for today's month of service presentation. We're here to present for you all today for inherited property, clearing title, deferred property taxes, and other probate concerns. My name is Nia Murray. I am the programs coordinator with Neighborhood Recovery Community Development Corporation, and we are one of the partners in the A Month of Service collaboration. Also included, we have the City of Houston's Department of Neighborhoods, and joining us today, we have Ms. Cecile Carlson. And also on behalf of our presenting partner, we have the Texas Legal Services Center, Ms. Lisa Nelson, the Harris Central Appraisal District, we have Ms. Mabel Menifee, as well as the Harris County Tax Assessor Collector's Office, we have Ms. Shea Pinkowski, who will be presenting information for you all today. But also included in the partnership, we have Lone Star Legal Aid, the Earl Carl Institute, and Houston Volunteer Lawyers. And together we all make up A Month of Service. And basically what A Month of Service is the collaboration of all 8 of our organizations. We come together on a monthly basis and offer a variety of different workshops, provide resources and information to the communities that we all serve relative to asset protection, asset building, the maintaining of generational wealth, and community empowerment. So we started this collaboration several years ago in an effort to try to reach more people and to create a greater impact, and get as much information out to the community as we possibly can collectively. Again, because we do service the same community and we have similar goals in mind is to get that information out there, we decided it would be a great idea to collaborate and create this partnership. So we were at once upon a time doing these presentations in person every single month. But it got to a point where, of course, we had to transition to the virtual platform, which has in itself been a great opportunity for us to reach even more people in surrounding counties and across the state of Texas and even across the country because we are on a virtual platform. So where our reach has gotten even greater because of that. But however, we're going to try to slowly transition somehow back into doing a hybrid presentations occasionally in person as well as online so that we can continue to get that information out to those that can't join us in person. So with that being said, information that we do provide for you all through these workshops are for educational purposes only. They are not to be considered or any kind of as a substitute for legal advice. And we do encourage you to reach out to our legal service partners that do offer free civil legal assistance for those that find themselves in need of any types of civil services. In addition to that, when we do these workshops, we try to make sure that we've got those professionals that are experts in those areas to provide that information for you all so that you're not kind of getting misinformation that's kind of being put out there in the masses, especially, like on social media and things like that, that is not relative to the laws in the state of Texas. So know that wherever you are joining us from, that the information that does get presented, it is relative to the entire state of Texas, not just for the city of Houston or for Harris County or anything like that, that it is relative to everyone. So if you are, if you're coming back, we want to thank you for continuing to support this collaboration. If you're new to our presentation, we want to welcome you and thank you for joining us. This is your opportunity to engage with the professionals in their areas to ask any questions that it is that you may have. In addition to that, we also want to make sure that we are protecting your privacy as much as we possibly can. So note that we are broadcasting live on a virtual platform on our social media pages, as well as recording this session. So we try to ask that you keep your questions to be as general as you possibly can, so that your personal information is not kind of getting out there for everybody to have access to. So do keep that in mind when you're asking your question. Feel free to type your question into the chat, and or unmute yourself at the end, and or raise your hand and we can call on you and you can ask your questions directly of the presenters. We know that I have a couple of questions that were emailed to me in advance, and I'll make sure that I ask those questions to get those things addressed for you. If you are joining us on our social media sites, feel free to type your question into the comment sections, and I'll make sure that it gets addressed in that way as well. So do keep that in mind. But again, we want to thank you all for joining us and continuing to support this collaboration. And ask that you pay this information forward. We know that there are a lot of underserved communities that are out there that don't have access to this information. You have relatives, you have coworkers, you have, other friends and neighbors that don't know this information. So we ask that you do share it. Because this session is being recorded, we do send out a link along with all of the resources that get talked about throughout this presentation. All of that's going to be sent to you all following this presentation as well. So know that you can go back to that and reference it and watch it again or something like that. But we do this particular session the second Thursday of each month. So if you want to come back for, the latest update, changes in policies and procedures and things like that, they do change on a regular basis. So we do try to make sure that we, keep up to date with the changes in those laws and what have you. So you will receive the most up-to-date information each month. Or if you decide, oh, there was a question I was supposed to ask last month, or this particular issue has now come up, can somebody address this for me, and what does this mean, and so on and so forth. So this particular session is also kind of the part two. Last week's presentation was about wills and estate planning, and why do you need it and how to create your own will. The kind of the preemptive of what happens before you pass and things to prepare for and what to kind of put into place. This particular session is the after. What happens when someone actually passes, with a will, without a will? What happens, during the probate process, and what does all of that actually mean? What's the responsibility of an executor or an administrator of somebody's estate? What if somebody passes and they had property taxes that they owed or that were deferred? What are their options? How do they make those payments? What the time frame is? So that's why we make sure that we included the appraisal district as well as the tax assessor collector's office too as part of this presentation, so that you guys can get that information as well. So by no means do we expect you to be the experts by the time we're done with this, but at least you'll have a little bit more guidance and a little bit more information and know where to go to get your particular questions and things addressed, or how to then proceed with, what do I do next, or how do I get this done? What form do I need to use? How do I get it um, uh, implemented or executed, and things of that nature. So Miss Lisa is going to go over all of that information for you guys. But then again, also to know that the resources, the templates and things that she goes over, we are going to send all of those things out to you guys too, so that you'll have that as well. But so with that being said, there is a lot of information that's going to be covered here today. So if you do have questions, please feel free to chime in, ask your questions, type it into the chat, so that we can make sure that the information that you need for coming to this presentation, that it does get addressed for you guys. So do keep that in mind. With that being said, we are going to go ahead with our introductions, and then we will move on into the presentation. So Miss Cecile, would you like to introduce yourself? And your camera's not on, or you've got something in front of the cover? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure what's going on. My camera is on, the little light is on, the covers are off. I feel like it's just one of these days that, okay, now you froze. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we
Okay.
can.
Yeah, I'm having some connection issues. My apologies, but just want to say welcome everybody, and thank you so much for being here. Very excited to have another information session. Thank you to our partners also for taking the time to present. Quick announcement: if you all want to come and meet us in person, most of the partners that are here will be in person at the A-Leaf Metropolitan Multi-Service Center or the Neighborhood Center. We'll be there Tuesday, April 22nd from 10 to 12 a.m. All the partners that are here will be there present. So if you want to stop by, chat with us, get a little bit more information, or maybe ask us a question one-on-one, we're going to be there again. That date is April 22nd at the A-Leaf Neighborhood Center. That is 11903 Bel Air Boulevard from 10 to 12. And without further ado, I'll let the rest of the team introduce themselves. Thank you all so much.
And I will send out a copy of that flyer for Coffee and Conversation to you guys as well when we send out the link of this recording. So Ms. Mabel and Shay, why don't we have you guys introduce? Ms. Lisa will have you introduce last, so that way you can move on into starting the presentation. So Ms. Mabel?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mabel Menifee, and I'm with the Harris Central Appraisal District, as Mia said. And I'm here sort of as a backup to Lisa and the presentation about clearing title on inherited property, because a lot of times property tax issues often come into play when someone is trying to clear up a title or gain title, and a lot of things that you may not know to look for when that happens. I'm going to provide some information specifically about exemptions and some of the issues that might be there once a property changes ownership, as well as just some information about the appraisal district and the role that we play in property taxes, in the property tax system in Texas.
Okay. Shaya?
All righty. Hi, everyone. My name is Shay Pinkowski. I'm here with the Office of Annette Ramirez with the Harris County Tax Assessor Collector's Office. It's a mouthful, I'm sorry. But we are here to help clear up some questions that you might have about paying your property taxes whenever you're trying to get those titles cleared, and the process and what options you guys might have available to you whenever you do go through that process of trying to get those taxes paid. Along with some questions that probably will come up about any penalty and interest issues that you might be having due to those things. So feel free to ask me any questions. I'm happy to help you, and I'll put our contact information at the end of the slideshow, but I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Lisa, and she'll be able to go ahead and get that ball rolling.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Lisa Nelson, and I'm a staff attorney at Texas Legal Services Center. It is a statewide organization. The office is located in Austin, Texas, but I am here in Houston. And I'm here to talk about clearing title and give a brief overview of the probate process.
Okay, it's coming up.
So this presentation.
We got it.
Okay, great. Thank you. This presentation is clearing title and other probate concerns. It comes about because a pretty common problem is that people believe because they have a house that's been in the family, their grandmother, maybe, someone further back, an ancestor purchased this property and it's always been in the family. And people don't realize that just inheriting the property isn't sufficient. There's many more steps that you have to do in order to legally own that property. So we'll go over a probate overview and talk about how to clear title to inherited property. And I like to wrap it up by making sure that you know how to transfer property to your heirs. When I used to clear title on a routine basis, as soon as we would get everything cleared up, I would say, please, let's not put your family through this. Let's make sure that this property continues to be generational wealth. Then I will pass it over to Harris Central Appraisal District and the Tax Assessor's Office to talk about property tax issues, which are completely tied up with inherited property. Texas Legal Services Center has been around since 1981, and it's a statewide nonprofit that provides legal advice, advocacy, representation, and education to underserved people across the state. We have more than a dozen practice areas, and we touch pretty much every aspect of civil law that impacts low-income Texans. And just to let you know my role in the company, I'm on the team for Texas Law Help. TexasLawHelp.org is a comprehensive site that will tell you pretty much anything you need to know about civil law in Texas. And it is there for every Texas resident. We can only provide advice to low-income Texans, but the articles that we have, the forms that we provide are there for everyone. So let's start with probate concerns. And you probably think those of us at AMOS beat you over the head with probate concerns, but that's because we want to make sure that you have everything cared for. So there's a lot of new vocabulary that you will need to learn when you're dealing with probate. Decedent is another word for the person who passed away. Intestate is a person who passed with a will. Intestate is if someone died and they did not have a will, or the will isn't valid pursuant to Texas law. Testator is the person who is signing the will. And a will is simply a legal document that states how the testator's property is to be distributed at death. Estate is your stuff. It's your property, both real and personal, that you own as of the date of death. And probate is the legal process of winding up somebody's affairs. It is known as administration if there is no will. And when you go through the probate process, the court will appoint a personal representative. If there is a will, the court appoints someone to be the executor. It's usually the person named in the will to serve as the executor. If there is no will, the person is known as an administrator. Personal representative is a catch-all term. That's the person who's responsible for wrapping up the decedent's affairs and distributing the assets. An heir and beneficiary are both terms that mean the person who inherits either through a will or by law. There's a lot of common misapprehensions. I've been doing this for quite a long time now, and I'm still amazed at the things that people believe about probate process in general. Powers of attorney are only valid while a person is alive. Once they have passed away, that power is void. So when I would have people come to me and say, Mama didn't have a will, but I'm her power of attorney, it doesn't matter. That doesn't give you any power after the person has passed. A lot of people think that if they are married and the spouse owned a house, Texas is a community property state, so that house is mine, right? Not necessarily. If the deceased spouse had a house that was separate property, which would be a home that they purchased prior to the marriage, the surviving spouse has a life estate. They can stay in that house absolutely until they pass away. They are responsible for property taxes and for maintenance. However, if someone had a prior marriage, bought the house at that time, half of the house belongs to any children from that prior marriage. So the surviving spouse only has the right to live in the house. An executor or administrator needs to be over the age of 18 and live within the state of Texas. Texas has pretty flexible laws, and Texas makes probate pretty easy, but it's really best if you have an attorney prepare, or at least have them look over your will and make sure it is compliant with Texas law. If you are a regular of AMOS, we have constant will clinics. And there are other organizations in Houston that will provide you with a will and estate planning document without charge. So you can reach out to us and we can let you know when those will clinics are. I also put them on the calendar of events at texaslawhelp.org. I do not recommend downloading forms from the internet, such as LegalZoom. A lot of people think those are fine. Those will forms are developed in the most general terms. They are developed to not be to work in any state. That means they do not pay attention to what is the law in Texas. I've had a lot of people think, I'll just spend $100 on LegalZoom and get a will. And it comes time to probate, and their family ends up not being able to probate that will because it's missing important legal terms required in Texas. Spouses must have separate wills. I don't run into this as much as I used to. In the past, I would sometimes see where one spouse would write out the will for both spouses. They both would sign. That is not a valid will. That being said, Texas law does allow you to have handwritten wills. It's known as a holographic will. It must be completely in your handwriting. It cannot be typed. It cannot be a fill-in-the-blank form. We have instructions for that on texaslawhelp.org. Also on our website, we have forms that you actually can use to prepare your own will. They have been approved by the Texas Supreme Court. So the forms on our site are the one exception to forms you can get from the internet that will be okay. It's really important to keep your will in a safe place and let at least, a few people know where that will is, especially your executor. If they're not able to find your original will, the law presumes that the will was revoked and it would be the same as if you passed away without a will. If you do not have a legally valid will, the law determines who will inherit your property. If you can't find a will, you can file an application for administration. Depending on the circumstances, you can file for dependent or independent administration. In extremely limited cases, you can file a small estate affidavit. I'm going to go over all of this in detail in a few slides. The main, most important point in the slide is you really need to talk to an attorney to determine the best way to proceed if you can't find a will. Texas law requires that you have an attorney. Probate court is the one court where you cannot represent yourself, except possibly if you're an only child. However, you want to make sure that you've spoken with an attorney. There are people that go to the clerk's office, file what they think they need to file, and because they didn't speak to an attorney, they didn't use the proper process. They're out that $400 in court fees, and still they will have to go and get an attorney and spend more money to move forward. Probate assets are the property that pass under a will. So it would be anything you list in your will. That would include your home and any of your personal items. Non-probate assets do not pass under a will. And this applies whether someone has a will or does not have a will. Non-probate assets, I'm so sorry. Non-probate assets pass in accordance with the terms of a contract. Common examples include the following: life insurance, retirement policies, payable on death accounts. If you learn nothing else today, if you remember this tip, you may save your family the need to probate a will. You should absolutely always have a will, because there's a good chance that you may forget about an old account that you had. But if you have payable on death accounts, payable on death beneficiaries on all of your financial accounts, and a transfer on death deed for your home, your family probably won't need to probate a will, and they'll be able to access your assets much sooner. In Harris County, just because we're such a large county, you're looking at least a year to probate a will. Even if it's a very straightforward, simple will, it's just the courts are that backed up. So if you have the payable on death beneficiaries on your financial accounts and the transfer on death deed for your house, they'll be able to access things very, very quickly, within a month or two, as opposed to 6 months, a year, or even longer. Small estate affidavits are the one probate procedure in most counties in Texas where you do not need to have an attorney. However, it only works in very limited circumstances. The only way you can transfer a home through a small estate affidavit is if you are a surviving spouse or a child under the age of 18. If you are an adult child, even if you lived with your parent and were your parent's caregiver, you cannot use a small estate affidavit to transfer that home to you. All of the heirs have to agree. When you use the small estate affidavit form, everyone who is legally entitled to inherit has to sign that small estate affidavit. You also have to have 2 disinterested witnesses. The disinterested witnesses means that they knew the deceased person well, but they do not legally inherit from that deceased person. So it could be an aunt, a cousin, a longtime family friend. You cannot use this procedure if the person had a legally valid will. It's only valid for people who do not have wills. Also, the value of the assets, excluding the home, the value has to be greater than the debts of the estate. So if someone passes away and say they have $35,000 in assets, but they have $50,000 in debts, the judge will not approve the affidavit. You have to go through traditional probate. And also the estate, excluding your home, has to be less than $75,000. For both probate of will or an independent administration, the attorney begins the process by filing an application to probate. The application is posted for 10 days. After that 10 days, the attorney can schedule the hearing in front of the judge. That does not mean you will go to court in 10 days. What it means is the attorney can call the court and schedule the hearing. The last I looked, sometimes it could take 8 months or more to get a court date in Harris County. I hope that that's getting better. The personal representative, even before they're appointed, needs to gather all of the estate assets. Once they are appointed, they open a bank account for the estate. They have to get a tax ID number for the estate and then open a bank account. The bank account would be titled in the estate of John Doe deceased. Prior to that, you go in front of a judge. It's usually a very straightforward process. If there's a will, the judge has the witness review the will and point out that I recognize the signature. I know that this was their last will. They did not have any wills written after this. If it's an administration, they have to answer more detailed questions, but it's basically to prove that they're legally authorized to be the administrator. After you've gathered the assets and opened the estate's bank account, your attorney notifies creditors. Please do not think that the representative is responsible for the deceased person's debt. They absolutely are not. The debts get paid out of the assets of the deceased person. If the deceased person doesn't have enough money to pay a bill, that is not the executor's problem. That's not the administrator's problem. The final step, as long as it's an independent, if it's a probate of a will or an independent administration, the attorney and the personal representative work together to file an inventory. An inventory is a listing of what the deceased person owned as of the date of death. That has to be filed with the court. The judge will close the probate at that point. If it's dependent, it's a lot more detailed, and I'll go into that in a minute. If you live in a family home, you need to make sure that you have clear title. If you don't have clear title, you do not qualify for any type of assistance when there's a natural disaster. I used to have clients a lot that there would be a hurricane, there would be a winter storm, and they would go to apply for either the state or federal assistance programs, FEMA, and they find out that they didn't have clear title. They would need to get an attorney to clear everything up. And that, takes some time. That delays the process of getting your funds for repairing. So please check into this and make sure that you have a clear title before disaster hits. Additionally, and this is one of the reasons why I invited the property tax experts to join us, is that you are not eligible for property tax exemptions or deferrals if you're not the owner. Harris County Appraisal District will take payments from anyone. I could go down there this afternoon and pay Miss Mabel's taxes, and they would say, "Thank you very much, here you go." That doesn't mean that I own Miss Mabel's house. They're just, HCAT is just there to collect your tax fees. I know I would have clients that had their name, they even had their name on their appraisal district and tax assessor on their property tax account. Just because you have your name on the account, that doesn't mean that you have a clear title. If you have your name on the property taxes, it doesn't mean you have a clear title. You need to check back further. Another very important issue is once a person passes away, you only have a certain amount of time in which you can still collect their tax exemptions or deferrals. If they had a deferral, you're going to have to pay all of those back taxes. If they had an over 65 exemption and you're not over 65, you cannot use that exemption. I would run into young people all the time that would say, "Oh, no, don't change the tax information. I need to get that over 65. You can't get it, and you will be penalized if you try to abuse that. A clear title means that no one else has a financial interest in your property. The basic definition is that there's no question of who owns that home. And someone could easily trace the ownership history of property. If property isn't legally transferred or deeded to the subsequent owner, the title becomes cloudy. This happens when somebody dies without a will or the family doesn't manage an estate. Another time that title becomes cloudy is if someone puts a lien on your home. If you are owing property and say it's, someone was doing repair work, or say the IRS puts a lien on your home, you do not have a clear title. A lot of people get confused about the difference between title and deed. Title is your legal right to the property. The deed is the piece of paper that conveys that legal right to you. Real estate title is not a document. It is the strength of your ownership claim. It would be the ability for someone to go down to the county clerk's office and pull the property records and see you own the house, who owned the house before you, who owned the house before them. It's just the record and the legal claim to that property. Deed is the piece of paper that transfers ownership to the new owner. The easiest way to keep your title clear and the least expensive way to keep your title clear is to transfer real estate to someone by filing a transfer on death deed. You also can easily transfer title by preparing a will that is legally valid in Texas that leaves the property to someone. As I said before, not only will you not have any assistance for disaster repairs, you won't get your proper property tax relief. If you don't have clear title, you can't borrow any money against your house. So you couldn't get a home improvement. You couldn't get any type of loan at all. I used to run into situations quite frequently where people think the only thing you need to do is have a will. That will means that the house is mine once my mom passed away. That is not true. If you do not probate your loved one's estate, you probably don't have clear title to any real property, and you probably won't be able to access any of their financial accounts. So it's very important when someone passes to make sure that you probate a will, go through the administration process, or do what other legal process you need to do to transfer the home to the heirs who are entitled to it. There's a couple ways to clear title through the court system. You have 4 years to probate a will after someone passes away. So if they died relatively recently, you should probate their will or file an application for administration. If it's been more than 4 years, you can file what is known as probate as a muniment of title. That is a procedure in which you only need to transfer a house. All of the other deceased person's things have been taken care of. You've wrapped all their business up. You just need to clear title. A great example of that, it was not a client of mine. I happened to be in court that day and saw this procedure. This woman's husband had passed years and years ago, and she had taken care of everything. She didn't think he had a will, so she didn't go through probate. She was able to transfer his funds. He had the proper beneficiaries. She went to sell the house, and as they were clearing out the garage, she found an old safe. They were able to get a locksmith to crack the safe, and she found a will. So I don't even know, it's probably 10, 15 years after her husband had passed away, she had to go to probate. And when she explained this to the judge said, no problem. You can probate your will as a muniment of title. And what that is you file that court order in the deed records, and she now had clear title to the house. Another way to transfer to clear title is through a petition for adverse possession.
Lisa, I have a question.
Sure.
To figure out if you're a payable on death beneficiary or if there's a death deed on the property, would that be listed in the will, or how do we go about
Not necessarily. You would call the banks.
Okay.
Any banks, any retirement accounts, any life insurance, any type of financial policy that they had, you would call that institution and ask them. In terms of the house, hopefully they would tell you that there was a transfer on deed, but if not, transfer on death deeds have to be recorded in the county clerk's office.
Okay.
So you could go to the county clerk's office. You can even check online and possibly find it.
Gotcha. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so if your loved one passed away within 4 years, you want to probate their will or file an application for administration. Like I said earlier, in a case of probate, the judge determines that the will is compliant with Texas law. It's usually extremely straightforward. If the decedent didn't leave a will, you can file an application for administration. As I said, if it's been more than 4 years, you can file an application for probate as muniment of title. You can only do this legal process if there was a legally valid will. The other catch is that every single heir has to agree that the will can be probated because it's been more than 4 years. This is not as easy as it sounds. I had a case where a woman bought a house with her son-in-law. She passed away in the 80s. They never probated her will because they didn't understand that they needed to. 40 years later, they realized they don't have clear title and that they need to clear that up. We had to track down every living heir because she had died 40 years ago. This was about 50 or 60 people. We had to track all of them down and get every single one of them to sign a waiver agreeing that the will would be probated. So this is really just a last case scenario. Once the judge admits the will to probate, you record a certified copy of the order along with the will, and the property will be transferred. The person named in the will has clear title at this point. Adverse possession is something that most of you have probably heard about. It's a legal principle where if you've lived on property, let me just read the definition. A legal principle that allows a person to obtain legal ownership of a property based on the continuous occupation without permission from the legal owner for a specified length of time. So this is a situation where a real common one, there's a vacant lot next to your house. You keep that lot cleaned up. You put a garden on it. You let your kids play on that lawn. Everybody knows that that property is your garden. That property, that lot is yours. You take care of it. You never had permission from anybody to use that. You just noticed that it was abandoned and you wanted to clean it up and have it look good. There's different lengths of time depending on the situations. And this is, again, why you need to talk to a lawyer. It's usually at least 15 years where you've been occupying that property and meeting. There's a list of elements that you need to meet. I'm not going through all of them. The most critical is that you do not have permission. I had a situation where someone came to me to clear title, and it was a family home, and there were numerous heirs. And her relatives told her it was absolutely fine for her to live in that property as long as she wants. But they were not going to let her have that property. I could not use adverse possession to get title for her because she had permission to live there. Affidavit of heirship is known as a non-judicial proceeding. That means that you do not have to go in front of the judge. You also do not need an attorney for an affidavit of heirship. I'm always going to recommend that you have one. And when you are dealing with land, you want to make sure that any documentation of that land has absolutely no mistakes. If you make a mistake, the person who now owns that land has a cloudy title. So an affidavit of heirship gives property to the heirs of a deceased person. It's used if the homeowner did not have a will or the will is not probated within 4 years. It has to be signed and notarized by 2 people who knew the decedent and their family history. In other words, just like the small estate affidavit, you need 2 disinterested witnesses. You have to include the full legal description, which is found on the deed. Legal description listed on your property tax bill is not sufficient. And this is critical. This is one of those situations where if you do not have that full legal description, you do not have clear title. In a situation where we have a winter storm, you lose your roof, unfortunately. You go to FEMA, they're going to do a deed search, a title search, and they're going to see that you have a cloudy title because you only use the tax description. You will not qualify for that, for any of those benefits until you get that cleared up. You have to file the affidavit of heirship in the county where the property is located. There is a small filing fee for that. I promise you it is not even close to what you pay for probate court fees. Harris County, it's roughly between $40 and $50. Each county has slightly different fees. Now, both a small estate affidavit and affidavit of heirship do similar things. A small estate affidavit can only be used when you're transferring real property to a surviving spouse or minor children. There isn't another reason to use a small estate affidavit. If someone passes and the only thing they have is a bank account, they were a renter, they didn't own a house, they just had this bank account. Check with the bank first, because not all banks will accept this. But you can ask the bank if you can use a small estate affidavit to transfer other assets, such as a bank account. I have had situations where that was the only property. I went to the bank. We proved that, he only had one sister, so she was clearly the only heir. And I had a very nice bank manager who said, small estate affidavit is no problem. You can use that. If some banks will say, nope, have to have letters of administration. Affidavit of heirship is the best way to transfer a home to adult children. It can be used, I have used it to transfer to a surviving spouse when the deceased spouse had passed a long time ago, or other family members. You can use an affidavit of heirship instead of probate if the home is the only thing that you need to transfer. The only thing that they owned when they passed was the house. Once you go through this process, I beg you, please make sure that your family members don't have to go through this problem in the future. A transfer on death deed is a simple, inexpensive way to transfer a home or a real estate. Somebody is writing on their screen and it's somehow showing up on mine. I apologize for that. I'm not sure how to control it. Transfer on death deed is a simple, inexpensive way for a homeowner to transfer their home or other real estate to someone else on their death. You can use it as, say you have investment property. Say you own a rent house and you want to make sure to transfer that to someone else in your family. You can use a transfer on death deed for that as well. When you use a transfer on death deed, it absolutely does not affect the rights during your lifetime. The owner can sell the property, use it as collateral, get property tax exemptions, etc. The beneficiary has absolutely no rights until after the owner passes away. If you have a transfer on death deed on your property, you can change the beneficiary. You can cancel that deed entirely. An example that I used, when I've had people who want to transfer the home to their grandchildren, but their grandchildren are not 18 yet. I tell them to pick a responsible adult, transfer the house by deed to that adult with the agreement that the adult will sell the house and give the money to those grandchildren. Once those grandchildren turn 18, they can revoke the transfer on death deed and refile the deed with those grandchildren's names now that they're adults. This is important. The deed absolutely must be filed in the county where the real property is located. If you write a transfer on death deed and put it in a drawer with your will, it's worthless. It has to be filed before you pass away. Like the affidavit of heirship, there is a small fee, but if you think about it, it's worth every penny. If you have a transfer on death deed, it'll be roughly $45, $50 to record it in Harris County. If your loved one needs to probate your will, that's going to be more than, that could be $1,500, $3,000. I'm not even sure what attorneys charge now, but just the court fees can be more than $1,000. On our website, texaslawhelp.org, we have a transfer on death deed toolkit. It will provide you with detailed instructions and a form for creating your own transfer on death deed. Like the affidavit of heirship, you must get a legal description from an existing deed. Using the description from your property tax bill will be an incomplete transfer and your deed will not be valid. If you don't know where the deed is, it is fairly easy to find it. You can again go to the Harris County Clerk's office. It's on the 3rd floor of the downtown courthouse, and they will find a deed for you. There are also online websites where you can order a copy of your deed, and I believe for both the clerk's office and the websites, I believe it's just $1 a page. Another great thing about the transfer on death deed is that it protects your property from Medicaid estate recovery. That means that If you use Medicaid to pay for your nursing home bills, once you and your surviving spouse pass away, Medicaid can seek reimbursement through the value of your house. They can only do this if you go through probate. If you transfer your property through a transfer on death deed, Medicaid is not able to reimburse themselves, which allows your family to build generational wealth. This concludes my presentation. I will be checking the chat for questions, and I'll also be back at the end to answer any questions that might come up. Here are the resources. These are Harris County specific. Like I said earlier, texaslawhelp.org is for the entire state of Texas. The rest of these are for the greater Harris County area. Earl Carl Property Preservation is a great resource for clearing title to inherited property. Lone Star Legal Aid is a fabulous place, as is Houston Volunteer Lawyers. They can help you with any civil legal issues. Legal Line is a free program through the Houston Bar Association in which you can ask an attorney a legal question. They cannot charge you. They cannot take your case, but they can answer your question, and they're glad to do it. Houston Lawyer Referral Service is a great source if Earl Carl, Lone Star, or volunteer lawyers aren't able to help you. They can give you the names of attorneys who are specialists in that area. Some of those attorneys agree to take lower rates. Thank you again for your time this afternoon, and I will be back after we wrap up.
Okay, thank you very much. If I could also ask one of the participants, Miss Linda Burke, if you could please remove your whiteboard, your notes that you're writing on the screen. That's what was popping up. Those white lines, those marks where you were trying to take notes. It looks like who's doing a screen share? Who's this? Is it Miss Mabel?
Yep, I'm trying. Here we go.
Okay. All right. Okay.
All right. And let me go.
And for those that just had the question in the chat, a copy of this recording will be sent out to everyone. The presentation itself, the slides, do not get distributed, but the information in relation to the forms and things of that nature will be sent out along with the copy of the recording of this presentation. Okay, and as Ms. Mabel's getting started, again, please continue to put your questions in the chat or raise your hand and we can unmute you so that you'll be able to ask questions directly at the end of the presentation as well. Okay, so if you hit play from the beginning, Ms. Mabel, and then, but we see your screen so far.
You see it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, let me hit play from the beginning. If it is. Okie dokie. How's that?
And swap your view, go to display
Right.
settings. Yes, ma'am, you're all good to go.
Oh, good afternoon again. Once again, everyone. Again, my name is Mabel Menifee, and I'm with the Harris Central Appraisal District, and I'm here to sort of help with an understanding about clearing title and Lisa's presentation by giving you a little bit of information about HCAD and the Harris Central Appraisal District and the role that it plays in property taxes when it comes to clear and exemptions when it comes to clearing title on your inherited property. So we'll get started right now. Did that switch, Nia? Okay.
No, use your arrow key or
Let's see.
nothing yet.
There we go.
Yep, there you go. We're on the property
property.
tax support critical local
Right,
service.
so property taxes, just kind of a little bit of background on property taxes and appraisal districts for some of you who may want to know, particularly if you're new to the state, what role does an appraisal district play, particularly in the state of Texas. So we're sort of a subunit of the state of Texas. A lot of people think that we're part of the Harris County government, but appraisal districts are actually governed by the state legislature, and this Texas State Property Tax Code, we administer the laws that are passed by the legislature. And one of the reasons people are often surprised when they move to Texas about the rather outsized role that property taxes tend to play in funding local governments. But Texas has no state income tax. So without that state income tax, the local taxing units, the revenue provided for things like road, police, schools, fire protection, etc., is provided by property taxes. Again, I want to stress that those property tax laws do originate with the Texas State Legislature, and the state agency that has the oversight over appraisal districts, county appraisal districts, is the Texas Comptroller. The central responsibilities of all the appraisal districts basically is to value, appraise all property in the county, whether that's residential, commercial, agricultural, business, or whatever, and we're required to do so at 100% of market value each year as of January the 1st. We also administer exemptions, and that's one of the reasons I'm here to talk to you today. And we do something called certifying the appraisal roll, which basically says to all the taxing jurisdictions, this is the value of property within the county based on your tax rates. That's how they figure out what their tax rates are going to be. Now, I did want to just correct something that Lisa said, and I know she knows the correct answer, but sometimes we do get things kind of mixed up between the agencies that do various agencies and what they do. Please remember, HCAT does not collect property taxes. We simply value the property, appraise the property for its market value each year, and we administer the exemptions. You're going to hear, as soon as I'm finished, you're going to hear from a young lady from the tax assessor collector's office, and that is where your payments are actually going to be sent. But not to worry, we work in this every day and sometimes get it confused. So I wanted to make sure that you all understood. HCAD does the values and administers the exemptions, and your tax assessor collector is who sends out the bills and collects the money. So that date of appraisal each year, I did mention, was January the 1st. Also want to mention another important date as we're getting ready to send out annual valuation notices to property owners in Texas is that May 15th is usually going to be the protest deadline when you disagree with what the value that has been assigned to your property. When you disagree with it, you have the opportunity to protest that valuation. Then, of course, once we're done with the HCAT part of the calendar, that's when your tax bills are going to be mailed out. And then, of course, if they aren't paid for by February the 1st, they are going to be delinquent each year. So, and next we're going to go with the, again, I said we're required to be at 100% of market value, and we do have to comply with that. And the state actually tests all appraisal districts to make sure they are complying with that every couple of years. We are responsible in Harris County. We're actually the largest county in the nation that appraises annually. So we have 1.9 million parcels that have to be appraised, and we serve over 500 jurisdictions in Harris County. And that just depends on where you live. Most of you are only going to pay to maybe 4 or 5 at most, but there are over 500 jurisdictions in the county. This is what the valuation notice that comes out each year looks like. It's the letter that comes out usually in late March or early to mid-April that establishes the appraised value on that establishes your market value on the property as well as an appraised value. And there's a little bit of difference between the two, and we'll talk about that when you look at this bill. We'll talk about that in just a minute. The appraised value is what your taxes are going to be based on when you're looking at that bill. And that's may not be the same as the market value. The market value is what HCAT will determine each year. Again, and that's what gives you the opportunity to protest if you disagree with it. But the market value is essentially the value for which a property would sell to for a willing buyer on the open market when it is an arm's length transaction. So that's HCAT's primary role to establish that annual market value. It's also important to remember whenever there is a protest, those are based on the market value, not the appraised value. Now, the appraised value is going to be the one that is going to adjust based on your exemptions, how long you've had the exemptions, the 10% appraisal increase cap that people with exemptions benefit from as well. And it's important to remember that. Another reason it's important to remember that is because those exemptions are based on the individual and their qualifications and not the property itself. It depends on the person that owns the property and their qualifications. So that's always important to remember when, as Lisa mentioned, when property changes hands. These are some things that in terms of, I mentioned about protests, there's several forms of protest. And anyone who wants to dive deeper into how you protest, guess what? Starting at the end of this month and next month, we're going to have right here on the AMOS platform, several workshops that are going to help you walk you through that protest process. By then, most of you will have your annual valuation notices in hand, so you can have specific questions to ask. And on those workshops, we will have available a senior appraiser, probably the person that appraises property for the valuations, as well as a valuation analyst. So they can actually answer more specific questions about the protest process itself. So I encourage you to check the AMOS calendar and feel free to join us in a week or two for that series of protest workshops. So let's talk about exemptions and kind of help talk about the role that they play in saving money on property taxes and the importance of making sure you have the appropriate exemptions on your property or any property that you have inherited. These, as I said, are administered by HCAD. They're used in it. They are for the purposes of this conversation, as we talk about residential property. They are usually for the primary residence only, not usually, but they are for the primary residence only. So you can't have exemptions on more than one property. These are used again by the taxing authorities and jurisdictions, school districts, city, county, hospital district. They are used to determine or calculate your property tax bill. So exemptions are basically going to be a discount on your taxes. Let's talk about what the most common ones are. These are ones that everyone who lives in their home and owns it should have. That first one is the general resident homestead exemption. And then once an individual turns 65, they're eligible for additional exemptions with the over 65 exemption. Over 55 surviving spouse just ensures that should a spouse pass away while that couple is enjoying or has become eligible for the over 65 exemption because that spouse had reached age 65. As long as the other surviving spouse is at least 55 years of age, they are able to continue that exemption. There is something called the disability exemption, which is a lot like the over 65 exemption. The benefits are very similar. Then there are a number of disabled veterans exemptions, as well as other service-related exemptions. And it's important to kind of make sure you know going into as you inherit property that the person who the deceased may have had one or more of these exemptions. If they did, once that property is taken over, at some point, you will no longer be eligible for those exemptions. Or if you are, you would need to reapply for them in your own name. The general resident homestead, just quickly, here's some of the benefits of it. And you're required to provide proof of ownership. That's usually, of course, your deed on the property, as well as we do at HCAD. In order to approve that exemption, we do require that you also submit a copy of your driver's license along with that of anyone else whose name may be on the property. And that address on the driver's license does need to match the address of the property. I mentioned the 10% appraisal increase cap. That is something that is a protection that having the general resident homestead exemption provides in times of when properties values are rising rapidly. That 10% appraisal increase cap protects that property with the homestead exemption on it from going up any more than 10% in a given year. So that protects property owners from rapid increases in their value and the taxes that will come along with it. There is also a $100,000 school tax exemption, and that's by state law. So all school districts in the state have to provide that $100,000 exemption. There may be other exemptions, that additional amounts that some school districts may add on. There may also be other additional exemptions that various jurisdictions provide with some of these exemptions. So again, it kind of depends on where you live in the state as well as in the county. The over 65, now that is the one that you qualify, that a person qualifies for as soon as in the year, on January 1st of the year that they turn 65. The disability exemption is one that you can qualify for once you become eligible to receive disability benefits from Social Security, or in some cases, people may not be on Social Security, but if they can also receive that qualification through completing by having their physician complete a statement using a specific form that HCAT provides. The additional benefits of that over 65 exemption, again, your school taxes will freeze for whatever the year that you turn 65, whatever you were paying in taxes on for schools that year, it freezes at that amount. You will never pay more than that. It can go down lower if the value falls, say for instance, on that property, but it can't go up unless additional major improvements are made to the property, such as you add square footage, you build a tennis court or something in the backyard, in which case you've increased the value, so the ceiling may be reset based on that new value. You're also eligible for tax deferrals, or you can pay taxes in installments, and you can do so without penalties. Shay is going to talk about that a little bit more in just a minute. And then again, there may be other exemption privileges that various jurisdictions provide. It just depends on where you live in the county. The over 55, I kind of already explained in terms of that being something that the surviving spouse, as long as he or she is 55 years of age, they already had it on their account because the deceased spouse had already turned 65, they're still eligible for that. This is something I also want to mention to some of the folks who may be living in property that they may not necessarily own 100%. There may be other heirs to the property. Say there are 4 siblings, and so they may actually only have 25% ownership. Let's say they're living in the property, they're paying the bills, they're paying the taxes. They can qualify for getting 100% exemption in terms of the homestead, but there are a few additional procedures that you need to follow. Now, before this piece of legislation was enacted, in many cases, if an heir was living in the property and they only owned 20% of it, they were only eligible for a 20% of the exemption. This particular heirship exemption allows them to get that 100% exemption since they're paying the property taxes anyway, and it does not affect the ownership rights of any of the other heirs. It simply gives that person who's paying the bills the opportunity to benefit from that homestead exemption. So as you can see, there's certain requirements for that that I've shown below. However, I do want to say, if there is any confusion about this for anyone listening, where this may apply, do call HCAT. Our exemptions folks will be more than happy to walk you through this process to make sure that you get that exemption if you indeed are eligible. So the next one, and this is something I just want to clear up because there is a lot of confusion in the community about an exemption versus a deferral. Exemptions are something that you qualify for, and they give you a discount on your taxes as long as you are eligible for them and you're qualified for them. That there is nothing to pay back. It simply gives you a discount on your taxes for that year. The deferral is something else. That means that is when you postpone those taxes, and that is when those taxes are going to come due once that person who has that deferral on their property tax or on their home, once they have that deferral and they pass away, and those taxes are going to come due normally within 180 days of that person passing away. So that's important to keep in mind. Discount versus deferral. I've heard people in the past say, well, I don't want any exemptions because my kids will have to pay that money back. No, that is not the exemption, unless the kids have been living in that house after you passed away and they were living off exemptions that they weren't eligible for. Yes, they may have to pay, which is why it's so important for you to make sure that any property tax issues are cleared up upon inheriting a home. But the deferral is something that you will have to pay that. And again, Shay's going to talk a little bit more about that in her presentation. This is just something I also want to mention because there's been a lot of buzz with a recent state legislature, with a recent state law that requires all appraisal districts to basically audit the people with exemptions at least every 5 years to make sure that they have the exemptions they are eligible for. In Harris County, and what happens when the state passes a law, different appraisal districts may fundamentally have different procedures on how they obey that law or how they conduct that process. And that's probably some of what's going on with a lot of confusion about this particular exemption audit. I do want to assure folks in Harris County that we have for some time, HCAD has for some time had a procedure in place that helps us verify those each year. I don't know if any of you recall that little card you get from HCAD, usually in mid-December, early January, that goes out. It's a little postcard that says, for that particular tax year coming up, you receive the homestead exemption. It'll show you the exemptions that you already have on your account and and it also will remind you that you may actually qualify for additional exemptions. It does also state that if these are not correct, if these no longer apply, then you need to notify HCAD, and that's by state law, because they can collect the back taxes on ineligible exemptions. They can go back as far as 5 years. So this card each year goes out to Harris County residents. It's HCAD's way of making sure we audit each year, and so we've been doing that for a number of years. So we haven't really had to kind of scramble to come up with new ways, come up with methods on how that's going to happen, like you might have heard some appraisal districts having to do. Remember, with us, this is already in place, but you may want to look for that card in January or December, and it will basically tell you what your exemptions are. Now, this card is not forwarded. The post office does not forward it. So when it comes back to HCAD, that is usually a red flag for us that that person may no longer be living there, and therefore those exemptions will need to be removed. If that happens, they could be removed, and the person living in the home would need to reapply for the appropriate exemptions. And just how do you get an exemption is very easy. There are paper forms that you can fill out that HCAD can provide. We have a mobile app that works on for quite a few types of exemptions, or you can just simply send in an email using one of our own fillable forms online. Fill that out, submit that along with the driver's license if you're applying for an exemption, and send that to HCAD. We do ask that you do try and submit all of the appropriate documentation at one time, so that's not delayed. And and once it is applied to your account, you will be notified of that. For anyone who may still be a little hesitant about filling out that exemption form, there is a how-to video on our website that you can actually play to follow along as you're filling out the exemption form. It'll provide you with all the information that you need to know to get that sent in and to have the appropriate documentation. I also want to mention, please keep in mind that applying for exemptions is absolutely free. You simply need to apply for HCAT. Sometimes people may get something in the mail saying, let us help you with a designation of homestead for a fee, that sort of thing. Those are private vendors, and you do not need to pay for getting your exemption, as well as contacting HCAT to correct exemptions. So this is what our website looks like. And it is, again, when I mentioned, like I mentioned to someone, property search, you want to go out and check your property, make sure everything is correct on it. You'd simply go to this under that second blue line, go to the first one, property search, type in your address, and just double check, make sure you have the exemptions that you're supposed to have. And then, and you can also, once the valuation notices go out and you are noticed, that information will also be on the website. We also have forms. All of the forms that I mentioned for some of the exemptions are, as well as others, are available under forms. We also have various helpful videos for different questions that are available under our help column. So a lot of times there's a lot of helpful information already on our website. Which you can go out and find almost immediately. The contact information for HCAT, should you have any questions, or you want to come out and visit us, we're at 13013 Northwest Freeway, which is at the Hollister Tidwell exit. But you don't have to leave your home. You can simply email us. Again, go on our website and look, or you can also have an online account that you can send your questions in and they will be answered as well. So that basically concludes my take on exemptions and how they work with clearing title and inherited property. And I do thank you for listening, indulging me today. And I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague over at the Harris County Tax Assessor Collector's Office, Shay Pinkowski.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Mabel. I appreciate it. Let me go ahead and get my screen shared over here. And there we are. Okay, so I am with the Harris County Tax Assessor Collector's Office. Our new tax assessor this year is Miss Annette Ramirez. And I have just a little brief introduction to her for you here on my computer screen if you'd like to read a bit more about her. She's our newest tax assessor collector. She is coming from a very long line of experience being legal counsel for Aldine Independent School District. Very knowledgeable, very nice. And, you know, if you ever have a chance to meet her, she is, you know, our newest tax assessor collector. So you'll see her name on all of your bills. So if you're very used to seeing Miss Ann Harris Bennett on there, that's no longer going to be the case. You're now going to be seeing Miss Annette Ramirez. So don't go looking for a bill that's non-existent. As a tax assessor, her responsibilities include collecting property taxes for 75 jurisdictions in Harris County, which are all the ones that we collect for here, along with completing vehicle registration and title transfers for the residents of Harris County, along with managing the voter registration process and making sure that we get all of our voters registered for elections as they come up. So, you know, tax assessor collector is a really big responsibility, and we're all really excited to have her. Just a quick overview for our property taxes that we collect for here in this office. The Harris County Tax Office maintains approximately 1.7 million tax accounts, and we collect for more than $80 billion in taxes every year from everyone. We disperse to over 80 taxing jurisdictions, but the more common ones that you'll see on every single bill are going to be the Harris County bills that you would receive, including Harris County, your Houston ISD, or another ISD tax that we might collect for City of Houston, Harris County Flood Control District, along with some of our community colleges as well. So you'll be familiar with your property tax bill that would include those jurisdictions on there. We do collect for multiple, so our bill is not just one line of information and then that's it. Our line is more of a, several lines of that information as it comes to you every year, depending on where you're located. Just a brief visual on how we calculate your tax bill. Tax bills are determined by the taxable value of your property, meaning how many or what we are able to collect taxes on for the property value that the appraisal district maintains. We multiply that by a tax rate, which is determined by the taxing jurisdiction that is applicable to you. So every jurisdiction comes up with their own tax rates every year, and we use that to multiply it by your taxable value, and that's how we determine how much your tax bill is. So there is a method to all those numbers that go onto your bill at the end of the year, and I'm happy to explain that, or if you have any questions, then you're more than welcome to reach out to our office and we can assist you with those. Recent tax changes in law. So we've had quite a few changes recently that have reduced the tax bill on a lot of accounts in our county, including the Harris County exemption for over 65 and disabled homeowners has increased from $275,000 to $320,000 per that exemption that is applicable to Harris County. The City of Houston has raised their exemption for their over 65 and disabled homeowners as well, and that's gone up from 160,000 to 260,000. Our general homestead exemption for school taxes, meaning your ISDs, was increased from 25,000 to 100,000. So a lot of you saw that really nice jump in your exemptions for your school on your bill this past year, and it continues to go on this year in order for that to continue on. And in addition to that, we are able to, the appraisal district is able to have the homestead exemption eligible for proration, meaning that instead of as previously where you would have to wait for the first full year in which you own that property to have a homestead exemption placed, you're able to have that exemption placed on based off of the day in which you purchase or the day in which you become eligible for that proration to be applied to the account. So it makes it so that you have not the full exemption for the full year, but at the very least a portion for the year in which you live there to be reducing those taxes for you. In addition to this, we have just basically the highlights of this most recent 88th legislature pass, which increased those school homestead exemptions for your ISDs to 100,000, along with the limiting to the appraisals on increase on certain properties, and the restructure of the school financing system, which created the taxing limitations for your school to be raised, which in turn reduced the amount that you pay for your property taxes on your school. So if you're over 65 and you have been over 65 or disabled for some years, then that made it so that the cap or the limited amount that you pay for your taxes was reduced. So some of you saw a reduction in your taxes for school due to that change in the 88th legislature. I have another visual here for our tax bill. This is something that you would see every year. Normally around November is when we start sending those out. But you see here the bill at the top is where it displays the differences and what is being collected on and for why and how much. Along with the bottom portion there is a copy of your coupon, meaning this is the part that you would be able to perforate and remove and send in with a form of payment. Or if you come into one of our offices and decide to make your payment in person, you can submit this in with your form of payment so that we can search for your account and ensure that all the information that is pulls up correctly. But this is something that you'll be very familiar with, come at the end of the year. This is something that you should be used to seeing. But this is what our property tax bills look like. We have a visual for our homestead exemptions and our over 65 exemptions and how much of a difference it makes to have those exemptions on your property versus not having any exemptions whatsoever. So on a general basis, without any exemptions, a property of $325,000 would equate to a property tax bill for $7,153 without any exemptions on it. Along with further on, you can see that the homestead exemption does reduce those taxes, and it's not, it is a significant bit, but it reduces it by approximately $1,800, and you get a smaller tax bill because those exemptions reduce the taxable value of your property by that much to where you would have a tax bill of $5,323. That final column there is in reference to properties in which you have the homestead and the over 65 or disabled homeowner exemption on there. And that does reduce the taxes by a great bit. It reduces it almost by $5,000. Instead of paying a bill of $7,153, you would pay a bill of about $2,327, which is a pretty big difference. And that's not including anything in reference to tax ceilings or any other exemptions that might be applicable. So it's always good and recommended that if you are eligible for those exemptions, that you go with the process of getting those exemptions and in order to be able to pay the correct amount for your taxes. Taxing limitations. I spoke on this a little bit earlier, but this is in reference to school tax ceilings or tax freeze. You'll hear them almost interchangeably, but a tax limitation, in my opinion, is the best way of explaining what it is. And tax ceiling or tax limitations are the method in which we limit how much property tax you pay for your school. It does not apply to all of your taxes. We aren't able to apply this all across the board, but it does apply to your school taxes of homesteads with a disabled or over 65 exemptions applied to the account. And as I mentioned before, it limits how high your bill can be for your school tax. So it's a pretty great help for those who, otherwise would have to pay a larger amount. Even with the exemptions applied to the account, this limits it further. You would not pay more than what your limitation is, but you can pay less, meaning that's where that whole description of it being a tax ceiling is. We do offer methods of payment aside from just paying incomplete at the end of January when they're normally due. If you aren't able to make those payments timely for whatever reason, we do have other options available to you. We have flexible payment methods that we're able to do for homesteaded properties, along with a couple of other options. But right at the top is our payment arrangements. These are available to everyone. You do not have to have a homestead in order to have a payment arrangement. So it is an option for those of you who have who are in the process of probating your taxes in order to get those completed and paid off. But it is a financial planning tool. It can be paid off early, meaning that while you do have terms listed in which you have to pay or you would make those payments for that payment arrangement, you are able to pay those early. So if you have a 12-month payment plan and it's only going to take you 6 months to make those payments, then you're welcome to do so. And it helps you avoid collection efforts along with foreclosure actions on your property when you have these on there. We're able to start payment plans as soon as the account becomes delinquent, which for most of us is going to be February 1st. So long as that payment arrangement is created prior to the attorney's fees contracts beginning, usually that's in July, you're able to avoid those attorney's fees as well. So it is something that we recommend if you know that you're not going to be able to pay your taxes, that you can go ahead and create that payment arrangement with us. Here's a few more details in regards to that, including our two types. We have a homestead payment plan along with our general payment plan. The general payment plan collects property taxes at the same rates at which it would without the payment plan. So you continue to make your payments with your regular penalty and interest accruing. All of that penalty and interest is calculated into your payment arrangement. So whenever you are making those payments, so long as they're being made timely, you wouldn't be surprised with extra penalty and interest at the end of it, so long as you maintain those regular payments to your account at the end of every month. We are able to do those for 12 months. And as I mentioned before, it is something that you're able to pay off in early. So if you pay it off sooner than the anticipated 12 months per the payment plan, you would pay less. Equally so, the homestead payment plan is something that we offer for our homes with homesteads on the account, along with the option of having it for a bit longer. Instead of it being a limit of 12 months, we are able to do 12 to 36 month payment plans. And normally those go 12, 24, 36, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Those develop a 1% interest per month plus the additional penalty and interest in that payment. So in February, that would be the 7%. And then in March, it would be 8 for the 1% increase. And then 9, 10, 11, and that gets calculated into the payment arrangement as well. But it does reduce the taxes because as opposed to your general payment plan, which increases per the normal payment schedule for penalty and interest, it does reduce it by a bit. You are able to use either of these on prior or current years or tax, or rather any tax years prior to the one that we are currently collecting for now. So currently we're collecting 2024 taxes. You're able to do this if you have the past due amounts for prior years as well. So anything prior to 2024, you can put it on the same payment arrangement if you have not already. And we are able to assist you in getting that taken care of here. You can request for it in person, online, over the phone, or if you'd prefer to send us an email, you're more than welcome to do so, and we can assist you in getting those set up that way as well. In addition to our general payment arrangements, which are available towards our homesteads, towards our non-homesteaded properties, our over 65 exemption homesteads are able to do something called a quarterly payment plan. And quarterly payment plans, what they do essentially is we split the entire base amount of your taxable levy into 4 equal payments. And we give you a timeline in which to make those 4 payments. So the first payment would be due at the end of January, as your taxes normally are. Your second quarterly would be due at the end of March, third at the end of May, and fourth at the end of July. And so long as all of these payments are made timely, you do not pay any penalty, you do not pay any interest. It just gives you an additional time in which to make those payments when you're that over 65 disabled homestead owner. And this goes to all unpaid taxes for that year, meaning that this year, if you wanted to create that payment arrangement for quarterly payments, if for whatever reason the account was just recently certified and you're just getting that bill, you can contact us and we can assist you in getting started up on that quarterly payment plan, so long as you have that over 65 or disabled homestead on that property. But that does tend to help a lot of folks who just need a little bit more time to make those payments, and it helps to be able to space it out and feel more comfortable in making those payments regularly. Now, Ms. Menifee, you spoke on this a little bit earlier. Ms. Mabel was explaining about the tax deferral and how it can assist in, making sure that you're making your property tax payments and that you're covered for your property taxes. A lot of times the deferral gets confused with the exemptions, and as Ms. Mabel explained, it is best to understand it as a discount for your exemptions versus a postponement for the deferral. So the deferral would be a postponement of your taxes that help avoid and prevent foreclosure on your home. So for our over 65 and disabled homeowners, this is really a big help when it comes to last minute emergencies and unknown, just in cases that could happen. So essentially, instead of paying our usual schedule of fees for penalty and interest, these accounts that are deferred have a 5% interest per year. And that equates to about, I think it's 2-point-something% per month, if that. But essentially, this is a postponement of your taxes, meaning it gives you additional time in which to pay your property taxes without accruing the same amount of penalty and interest fees that you normally would have. And it helps those who are under a limited budget, or they are, getting their situation together in order to make those payments. But it is helpful for those situations in which you then expect it happens and you are not able to make your tax payments. Say you're out of town, or you're in a hospital, or you're on vacation, the tax bill didn't get to you and you forget to check online. All of these situations with a tax deferral help you avoid foreclosure and tax sale when it comes to your property. The deferral does end upon the change in ownership of the property, meaning if you have the over 65 deferral on your account and you decide to sell it to someone, if you decide to gift it to a relative, if you unfortunately pass away, the deferral ends, and you have whoever is the owner of the property has 181 days to make those payments for the taxes owed on the deferral rate with that 5% penalty and interest, versus, and after those 181 days, the penalty and interest fees on the account get added onto the account as they would have normally. That deferral end date from that deferral end date, you have 181 days. So it's best to make those of your family, those who you intend to pass your property along to, once you're in that process, to let them know and to advise them, I have a deferral. I'm not paying my taxes because I don't have the money to pay my taxes right now, or I choose not to pay my taxes at this time. Just so that they're aware that there is a time limit to which they're able to pay with those reduced penalty and interest fees, or with that reduced interest fee rather. This can be applied for with the appraisal district. They would be able to accept your application and get that process started for you. Again, you do have to have either the homestead and over 65, or the homestead and the disabled veteran, or the homestead and the disabled exemptions on your account in order for that to be applicable to you. We do recommend that whenever you're thinking of starting the process for getting that deferral on your account, that you speak to your mortgage company if one exists. And that counts for reverse mortgages as well, because not all mortgage companies will accept the deferral as a reason to not pay your property taxes.
Shay, I just kind of wanted to interject right here, since you were on this particular page, that it is very important that you guys have conversations with your relatives that are eligible for the tax deferral, because sometimes you get your parents, your grandparents, or the elders that don't want you in your don't want you in their business. They don't want you to know that they're experiencing some kind of financial difficulties, or that they're applying for a deferral, and then by the time they pass, the heirs never knew that there was even a tax deferral that was on the property, and now they're hit all of a sudden with this huge tax bill that they didn't know that they had, that wasn't being paid over a period of years. So if there's a tax deferral and then your parent got the qualified for the deferral, they got it, they haven't paid their taxes in 5 years, keep in mind, you've only got 180 days to pay all 5 years worth of those taxes before it becomes due. Now you got an issue with, potentially being in foreclosure and other penalties and things like that being added on. So please keep that in mind. Have the conversations with your loved ones and your relatives about a deferral versus the exemption. So I just wanted to make sure that I had to reiterate that part right there. So since you were on that section.
Yeah, most definitely. And it is super important that you have these conversations, because not knowing is half the battle whenever it comes to property taxes, because no one likes to receive a bill in the middle of the year saying, hey, you owe so and so many taxes, because they haven't been paid for all these years. And, it can really blindside a person whenever they're not anticipating it. So having that conversation helps, in which, if that is something that you're going to come into this property, or that it's going to have that deferral and they would like to make those payments, anyone can pay property taxes. You don't have to be the person on the property to pay property taxes. But if you're going to inherit a property and that it's coming, and if they are on a deferral and you'd like to make those payments, it's just helping yourself in the long run. They can be paid off whenever you have the ability to pay them off, but so long as they're paid before that 181 days, before that penalty and interest gets hit right back, that's the ideal situation, is that you're aware of that time frame so that you don't have to be caught off guard for it later.
And know that paying somebody's property taxes does not entitle you to ownership of the property. So do keep that in mind as well. Just because somebody pays your tax bill does not mean that they now own the property. That is not how it works in Texas. So regardless of what you see on social media, oh, pay these back taxes and blah, blah, and you can now get these properties. Nah, it doesn't work like that. So just because you pay the taxes doesn't entitle you to anything. So keep that in mind too.
Yes, most definitely. But that is a tax deferral, and it comes up a lot in conversation. So, or in regards to probating properties. So, if you have any questions about the tax deferral, feel free to ask me here in a minute. We do have quite a few payment options. You're able to pay online, by mail, by the phone, or by coming into one of our branch locations. All of these options are available to you. Now, we do want to make sure everyone is aware when you're paying with any form of card, whether that be online, whether that be coming up to the till in person, whether that be paying online or with a phone on our automated system. When you pay with a credit card or a debit card, there is an additional fee of 2.45% that is assessed by the banks. And then there are other options. If you have the money in your account, or you have the information and you'd like to make your payment online or by phone or in person, or online or by phone, you have the option of selecting for an e-check, which is an e-payment, and that is free. There's no additional fees for that. You input your account and routing information, and it takes it out just as if it would for a card payment. It's just a little bit more lengthy, and instead of going through your card, you go through your bank account, and that's an option for you if you have the money in the bank, but you don't want to go and get a money order or a cashier's check. You don't want to write a check. That's another option that's available to you. We're able to accept cash in person at our branch offices. We highly ask that you do not mail cash, because it has happened a time or two where someone mails in a amount of funds and we get an empty envelope, and it's just horrible for everyone involved. So best course of action, if you're going to pay in cash, come into the office and they'll be able to accept the cash that way. We don't accept cash inbound by mail, so just keep that in mind. And you're able to make full and partial payments, meaning that if you go online to make your payment and it's for your payment arrangement or it's for your first quarterly payment, you're able to adjust how much money you pay online or by phone. And then, of course, in person, you're able to pay with a teller in front of you, showing you, or with you telling them exactly how much you would like to pay to where. So these are all options available to you. And whenever it comes time to pay your property taxes, for those of you who are on a payment arrangement, you're able to do these 24/7 whenever you have the ability to do so online or by phone. And then in person, our offices are open Monday through Friday, usual office hours from 8 in the morning to or actually 7:45 to 4:45, if I recall correctly. We are here to help. We're happy to answer any questions that you guys have. If you have anything that you'd like to discuss here, I'll be going through the chat here in a minute, since I've been talking, but you can also reach out to us online if you'd like to send us an email. If you'd like to look on our website is full of answers that you may not even anticipate having questions to until you start reading. And then, of course, we have our call center who's able to answer questions for you as well. And as I mentioned before, if you have an email or a circumstance that you'd like to discuss, you're welcome to send us an email and we can assist you there as well. And that is it. So that is my presentation. I'm going to go ahead and hop onto the chat to see if I'm missing anything or if I've missed a question.
Yeah, I'm going to go back through those questions in the chat too, because I've got a couple that were emailed to me. So let's go back to the beginning. And I know that a couple of them were addressed already in the chat, but I do know that sometimes the participants are not looking at the chat, or if they are joining us on through social media, they can't see the chat. So I like to go over those questions sometimes, because lots of other folks may have the same kind of question and just don't ask. Question here. I keep hearing on the news from individuals fraudulently taking over the title to a residence without the owner's knowledge. How does this happen, and how can homeowners prevent this from happening? I'll kind of
So
chime in on that, Miss Lisa, if you guys want to go ahead.
I'm sorry,
who
could
wants
you
to go
repeat
first?
Fraud, the title, the scams and the fraud where people get their property taken.
That
Uh,
is I have heard of this. I haven't personally had any cases with this. I think it would be a great topic for a future AMOS presentation because I know that this is a new concern. You know, the one thing I can advise you is keep an eye on your title. You know, make sure keep your taxes current. Make sure that you don't have any liens on your property. There sometimes people will have liens on their property and not even know it, especially if it's an inherited home. Um, you can go to the Harris County Clerk's website and search for your title. I will warn you, it is not an easy website to use, and I've been using it for gosh, I've been using it for almost 20 years now. There are other websites. I'll see if I can find it and I'll chip in again. I found a website that was really good where I was able to find the deed to my house in less than 5 minutes because it was so much easier to search. But you know, just make sure to keep up with your business.
Yeah,
yeah,
honestly, keeping track of that paper trail is super important whenever you're going through whenever you're worried about that being a concern, because, you know, when things go fraudulent or when things happen to your account fraudulently or things happen to your property fraudulently, it doesn't necessarily come with a warning. So it's best to just keep an eye on your documentation, make sure you know where everything is. And, you know, if it occurs to you at some point in time and you have the ability to check online, to go through and make sure that you do so, because it's always best to check and be
And
wrong than to not.
yeah, absolutely. And I found the website. Now, they are not affiliated with me, with Amos, with any of us, but I do like it's called texasfile.com.
can you
And
put it into the chat so that I can
oh,
get the link out of
absolutely.
there? And then I'll make
Absolutely.
sure it gets attached as well. So definitely do you guys your own research there. But I will also say that I am in the process of trying to schedule this particular kind of workshop for April the 8th for next month. So I'm waiting on the presenters to confirm about title scams and things like that because it has been happening quite a bit more frequently than before. And from a personal, well, not personal to me directly, but from a very good friend of mine that did happen, and it seems as though because of the access to digital filings, that is how people are electronically and fraudulently submitting for these liens and these deeds to be properties to be taken over because of electronic filings that they have access to. So definitely the only way that you would know, because no notification or anything does go out, you would have to keep track just kind of periodically, once a quarter, twice a year, what have you. Go online to your where your register of deeds is for your particular property and do a search and see what new paperwork has been filed. My best friend's grandmother, who is still alive and well, just had her 93rd birthday. God bless her, had someone come and knock on her door to try to get her evicted because they supposedly bought her property that was uh, sold by her heir that lives in Florida, who sold the property to somebody here in Harris County because they produce a fraudulent death certificate, they produce fraudulent probate documents and all of that kinds of stuff, and sold it to this guy who thought he was buying a property sight unseen. So if anybody's out there trying to buy property, first of all, you should know that buying property sight unseen is unheard of, especially if you've never even, people think that they're going to get something for nothing. So basically, but definitely if it wasn't for the fact that we were able to go back and search those records, we found all of those documents. So definitely do a search to make sure, at least a couple of times a year. I'm going to get to you, Ms. Valerie, but I saw Ms. Joyce had her hand up as well. So Ms. Joyce, did you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, I'm enjoying this, and I'm over 65. I set my question in ahead of time because I type with one finger. And the question is, how do you trace a property? This property is over 70 years old because my grandparents had a farm. and they've died, and all of their children have died. So it's now being the taxes are being paid by the grandchildren, but the grandchildren have great grandchildren. And so I need to know how to send this forward, because some of them that have the some of the property in their name have not kept up with the tax. So developers, of course, are paying the tax up and trying to get in there. So far, by the grace, they don't realize they're landlocked. But how do I, you know what my question is?
I know
How do I
exactly
find
what you
out where
mean.
we are? Okay, Lisa, thank you.
Where is the property located?
It's in Huntsville.
Okay,
Huntsville, Texas, and I saw the courthouse burned down in the early 60s. So,
Wow.
I want to send you to the Earl Carl Institute.
okay,
They're at Texas Southern University.
okay,
I'm not sure if they can help in Huntsville, but they have an attorney who
okay,
specializes in this type of work. So it's the
okay,
Earl Carl Institute, and
okay.
if you give me a minute, I'll look up their phone number.
Thank you.
And since they are one of the partners in our collaboration, I will the link for their site and their information will also be included on the email that I sent out as well to Ms. Joyce.
All
Oh,
right,
perfect.
great,
Okay.
great,
Okay,
great.
perfect.
And one more thing is I'm enjoying it so much. Y'all provide a needed service to a lot of people that at this point doesn't have an idea that they need it. So I'm gonna run my mouth.
And I want to
Thank
warn
you.
everybody out there, I knew which website I was looking for to look up deeds because I've used it before, but I couldn't remember the exact title. And when I searched for it online, I got 4 or 5 names before the website I was looking for. And those were all sites that would charge you a whole lot of money. You need to be more careful than you ever have been before, especially dealing with the internet, because there's a lot of bad people. There's a lot of bad people that are trying to scam out there. So when you're using search engines, make sure that you go to make sure that you look through, because if I didn't know the name of the site and I went to one of those top 4 or 5, I would have ended up in some type of scam site where they would have charged me a lot of money for that.
Indeed, indeed. All right, Ms. Valerie.
Yes, first off, I just kind of want to piggyback off Joyce. Thank you so much, ladies, for just all this information. Whew, you just don't, well, I'm sure you do understand how crazy this process can be. So I really appreciate it. Quick question regarding rental properties that might be in a will. If tenants were in those properties beforehand, what would essentially kind of be the process if they've kind of continuously paid, sending in their kind of monthly payments on rent? Would that essentially go into the estate account that was open? They would just keep putting it into that estate account, or what would be the movement regarding that?
If the estate still owns the rental property, you would put the rents in the estate accounts.
Okay. And no sort of withdrawals or anything can be made until there has been a decision on how the estate will kind of be divvied up in that account?
It can be withdrawn to pay bills. So when there's an estate account, while the estate is still open, you use that money to pay bills. For example, if there needed to be some maintenance on that rental property or any other types of bills. When the estate is open, most likely you need to pay taxes. These are not estate taxes, these are income taxes. And I am not a tax attorney, so you want to talk to a tax attorney or accountant about this, but when the estate is set up, you use that account to pay those bills.
Okay. Okay. I just remember somebody giving the presentation earlier said that this is when the creditors will start kind of reaching out to you. So I wanted to be sure if that can only be used for that, or we can use it for maintenance and things.
So take it back a step further though. So this is after probate. Because
yes, we are after probate.
This is after you become the executor of the estate or the administrator that gives you permission to go and take that money out and so on and so forth.
Correct.
So
okay.
there's that process. So Ms. Lisa, can you explain that process too? Once someone passes, application for probate is filed, and then
The attorney sends out notices to all known creditors. They
Mhm.
also have to post an ad in a legal newspaper to let anyone interested know that an estate has been opened and that they can contact, for more information, they can contact that attorney.
Okay, okay.
You can't distribute anything until you've settled all the business,
Mhm.
paid any bills, and closed the estate. And creditors have to use a very specific legal form in order to get paid. There's basically, I call it magic words. And if they don't use the correct magic words on their request for payment, it's not a valid claim against the estate.
Gotcha. Okay. I have one more other question.
Let me kind of let me before you get to the next part of that question. Also to note that as the executor, you are required to open an estate bank account. It
Right.
doesn't just happen. And then I mean, even for everybody else that's listening, in order to open an estate bank account, you have to apply for a tax ID number for
Mhm.
the estate. So there's a process and there's work for an executor or an administrator of somebody's estate. So just know that it's not, oh, so and so passed and I can go ahead and start taking money out of the account. No, it doesn't work like that, especially when you've got people that are kind of fighting, I want to be in charge, I want to be in charge, and I want to do this and I want to be in control of that. There's work. Being an executor of an estate is not an easy task. There is a lot of work that is involved that has to be done. And then you have to take that to the bank and then open up the estate bank account and keep track of all rental income, whatever kind of income from rental properties or whatever, into that bank account. You have to submit an accounting. You have to go and file a final tax return for the estate, all of that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that goes along with being an administrator of somebody's estate and handling those affairs.
That is absolutely correct. And anyone who thinks, I even though I've been doing this for a long time, a few years ago, I was the executor of my aunt's estate, and I had no idea how exhausting and how much work it would be. So don't ever think that it's just this great privilege. I mean, it's an honor that they trust you, but it's not some special, wonderful thing.
It's a job.
It's a big job.
Even to know who it is you're putting in charge, because executor may not always be, do the right thing by the estate either. So know who you're putting in charge of what's supposed to be done and who's going to have access to any of those counts or those assets that are supposed to be distributed to the rightful heirs. So keep that in mind as well. But you said you had another question, Ms. Valerie?
Yeah, thank you. If if the deceased had a business, and it's not necessarily listed in the will, from my understanding, I guess if there still are some people who inherited, it would go to them, even though it's not listed in the will. What would be the process regarding that?
That is a very complicated question, and you would need to talk to your probate attorney about it, because that's their job. Because it depends on the type of business structure it is. There's someone would need to review all of the, maybe not all of the business books, but enough to have an understanding of the business structure.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I see, Mr. Curry, you unmuted yourself. Did you have a question?
Yes, ma'am. I would like to know, my father is deceased and he's been deceased for many years. And I have his house here. Now I live in Lubbock. I don't live in Houston. I live in Lubbock. But I'm trying to get the probate forms filled out. And my question is, I have 5 other brothers and sisters, but I have like 3 sisters that are deceased and they have kids. So when I fill out those forms, do I have to write in each and every one of their kids on that form, or is it just the oldest, or how does that happen?
Did that person have a will? Did your father have a will?
No.
Okay, then yes, you have to include the children of the deceased sister. And Mr. Curry, you need to get an attorney. You can't probate an estate on your own.
Okay.
If you can't afford an attorney, Texas Tech has a law school, and they would probably have a clinic that could help you. You could also call Legal Aid of Northwest Texas.
Okay, Legal Aid of Northwest Texas and
Yes, sir.
Texas Tech.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Unfortunately, Texas is one of the states that you cannot represent yourself in probate court. You
You
have to
can't
have an attorney.
you can't represent yourself because it's not just your business. It's the person who's past business. It's all of the family members' business. You can only represent yourself when everything involved with the court is all about you and doesn't involve anyone else.
Well, I was just stating that because I was going to try to get the forms and fill them out before I contact an attorney so I could have the paperwork
Oh, sure.
so I can do that before I contact an attorney, correct?
You will be your attorney's favorite client if you come in that organized. So that's terrific.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you for your
And
question, sir.
and just to kind of let you know, this is my second time being on this Zoom call, and I'm like the young lady said earlier, you have a lot of information. You've definitely helped me the last couple of times I've been on here. So thank you very much for giving me this information and putting it out there for people like me.
Thank you very much. Your feedback is it's really helpful to get feedback.
Indeed.
All right.
And we really
Indeed.
appreciate the compliments.
All right. Thank you.
And
Thank you,
this is kind of why we continue to do this every month, because new people find out about it, and then now they kind of know, and so it becomes helpful for other folks. So that's why we also ask that you kind of pay it forward for those folks that don't know or don't know where to go or whatever. Then they have the option to come here and get the information that's needed for them. And again, someone else had actually sent me an email a little while ago that okay, Miss Mabel, let me go through real quick. Miss Mabel has to jump off. But I wanted to make sure that there aren't any the airship questions that are in the chat that are going to be for you specifically, Miss Mabel. And I know we are at our 3 o'clock time frame. If there is anything else that's in the chat, because I'm trying to go through here, that is specifically for you, Miss Mabel, I will try to get it. Oh, there was a question
There were
about
a couple.
questions about the exemption. Can you have more than one exemption over 65 plus disability?
So yeah, initially when I first read that question, I was thinking about the disability and the over 65 or homestead. You can, especially when it comes to veterans disability exemptions, because they have certain tiers, and Shay may be able to add it into that too. It's just there are a lot of ifs and buts about it, correct? And so I would just suggest that you contact our exemptions department, and they can help walk you through the specific exemptions that you might be eligible for, or you can go ahead and apply for them, and they'll get back with you in terms of what you might be eligible for, particularly when it comes to those veterans and veterans disability exemptions that are tiered by a certain percentage point, which I believe you get from the VA in terms of your disability level.
And that brings me to another. How can you apply for the exemptions if you're currently in probate, or if everything is currently going through probate?
You can apply for exemptions until the person who inherits property has received the property. So they either, if there's a will, what you do is an executor's deed, where the executor of the estate will deed the house from the estate to the person who's to inherit it. Once they have recorded that deed, they can apply for the exemptions, but you can't if the estate still owns it.
Property tax. Are you entitled to a refund if you haven't applied for your over 65 exemption, and how far back do you go?
Yeah, that you can go back current year plus 2 years, and then always keep in mind that you will be getting that refund from the tax assessor collector's office
with us. And yes, you do get a refund. It isn't something you have to apply for. Once it gets applied to the account and it gets pushed through the automated system, or rather the electronic system that we have from the appraisal district, we start the process in getting that refund issued out, and that gets issued out automatically. So once we get a correction that reduces your taxable amount, that whatever overpayment is on there gets refunded back out.
Now, because it used to be that you had to apply for the refund or request the refund. So now it's automatic?
Only for when it's an exemption that gets applied to the account. So if you have an overpayment because you paid twice, you still have to apply for that. If you get
Okay.
an overpayment because of, it's a tax ceiling, like we had a limitation that we had to add after the exemptions were applied to the account, that also you have to apply for.
Gotcha.
But when it's just complete, there was no homestead before and there is a homestead now, or no homestead, no over 65, and now there is, then that's an automatic. You can get that automatically sent to you in a check.
Gotcha. Okay. So, Ms. Mabel, I think that was it for you for the tax office. Will Shay put the tax email in there?
Yes.
Tax office's email in there. So if there are any questions about that.
There
Okay,
was
I think you're-
someone asking a question in reference to when you search the account and it comes up as the property information isn't available. This could be a couple of different things. So it really kind of depends on the situation, but normally we recommend searching by the account number, that 13-digit number that comes from the appraisal district, because there are protections that you can put in place for your account information. Like, say you don't want your information out to the general public, you can opt out from your information becoming available online so that they don't see your name. They'll just see like current owner, current address. Yeah, like, you don't want everyone knowing your information when your name becomes public, so we see that for a lot of judges, police officers, that kind of thing. So that's an option that you might have opted in for at some point in time, and that's why it's not showing your information. It could be that your account hasn't been certified for the 2024 tax year yet, in which case it would show for previous years, but not for current. And it could be something as simple as the way that the street is written. Like if it's Northwest Freeway, then, if you're writing it out all NORTHWF Freeway versus W or NW Freeway, that can cause some issues as well, which is why we say search for it by the account number, just because that account number can't be replicated. So there's only one such account in the entire county of Harris, and no dashes, no spaces, just 13 digits all the way across. But if they'd like to give us a call, we'd be able to assist them over the phone as well. And I don't want to put their information out here, so I'm not going to ask you for your address or your information. But if you'd like to give us a call afterwards, that phone number that I put there at the bottom, you're welcome to give us a call, and we'd be able to assist you in locating that account or seeing what it is that's causing it to not show on our website. But those are a couple of reasons as to why that might be happening.
Okay, I know we have quite a few more questions here, and I'm trying to kind of bundle them all together. Consolidate them all into one, but there are quite a few. And I know we are over our time, so if you guys do have to leave, then please let me know real quick so that way I can, I will make sure that I send out the recording. We will answer as many of these questions as we can, as long as we have the experts here to ask the questions. Otherwise, I'd have to send them the questions offline to then have you guys to respond to them, or do a continuation of some of these questions for the next presentation. So
I don't mind sticking around for a bit longer.
I can stick around too.
Time.
Okay, all right, good.
Makes it easier. I'd rather
Maybe I'll have to leave, but I know some HCAT things, just not all. So if I can't answer your questions, I apologize in advance.
All right, great. So for the participants, if you have to get back to lunch, because I know people tune in during lunchtime and stuff like that, don't worry. It'll be recorded, so I will send it out for you guys. You can go back and watch it later on. But question here, what about automobiles? Are they probated, or can there be a TOD on these?
There is a separate form that you can get. I want to say it's the Department of Transportation. Our website has a toolkit, and I posted a link to that toolkit in the chat.
And I will send out that form to you as well for the transfer of an automobile, because Miss Lisa sent that form to me a while back. So that'll be included in here as well. And that's to transfer ownership of any vehicles. And mobile homes are considered vehicles, right?
It depends on what type of mobile home it is. If it's like a pull behind trailer that's on wheels all the time and you can drag it around wherever you need to go, like an RV or like a Streamline or something like that, that's considered a vehicle. It's considered a type of mobile home trailer. But if it's a mobile home as in yes, it was moved to a certain place and it can be moved, but, and the way I differentiate in my mind is if it's always movable, then it's a trailer. If it's not always movable, like you have to go through a process of, getting a specific type of truck and putting it on wheels and lifting it and removing plumbing, then that's mobile home property taxes that you'd pay property taxes to. So we try to differentiate, but it's not always very clear when it comes down to it.
Okay. And we talked about the liens. How do you search liens on a property? Okay, we got that part. Copy of the presentation. Again, the recording will be sent out to everyone. The resources that Ms. Lisa listed for the other legal organizations, that will be sent out along with a link of their websites as well, for the Houston Volunteer Lawyers, Lone Star Legal Aid, and the Earl Carl Institute, along with the Texas Legal Services Center too. So their information will be included. Oh, you answered the question about no voice recording on a thumb
Absolutely
drive.
not.
Is that considered a valid will?
Yeah, absolutely not. For any, someone asked in the chat if they
Yeah.
could use a voice recording for a will, and you absolutely cannot. It has to be written. And by written, I mean either written or prepared by an attorney, but has to be a document on paper.
Okay. Answer the question about the exemptions, property line and surveys. Somebody asked the question about how do you find out about the property line without getting an actual survey. There is no way to know. I don't think that they record copies of surveys with the deeds and stuff. So there generally isn't one that's on file. To my knowledge, you would have to pay for a survey company to come out and measure property lines. Because I know somebody had mentioned something about the fences and people building on property lines and things of that nature. That happens quite a bit. So you would definitely have to get a surveyor to come out if you think somebody has got a fence that's encroaching on your property line. And no, we don't unfortunately have a list of surveying companies for you all to contact. Exemptions for one that's in probate, you guys answered that. Answered that. Refund, answered that. Ms. Lisa put the texasfile.com website for you guys to do searches for property, for taxes. For titles, for deeds.
And I don't know, because I'm fortunate that I don't have a lien on my house, but it should show any liens that are filed on your property.
Okay. Married in Texas, one spouse passes. Can the other spouse inherit the house without the will, or both together as a married couple? If bought before the married, same question. So if they buy a property together versus if somebody owned one before they were married.
If they were married when one of the spouses passed away, they can use a small estate affidavit.
Okay. When it comes to that, Miss Lisa, has there been any updates to that form that shows what the proper, what do you call it, inheritance law is?
No.
Like, who's supposed to assume? So the form is still
is
valid?
still good.
It's a distribution of,
distribution. I think it's like called descent and distribution, or something
descent
like that.
distribution.
Yeah,
So
that's the same. I'll let you know in September if they change the law this year, but I don't see that law changing.
okay. So I will attach that as well, because that was a question that was emailed to me, and that's included. So it's like a chart that shows you, once a person passes, who are the descendants automatically according to the law if there is no will. Like if it goes to the spouse, the children, the parents, siblings, it's like up, down, and out. So
it's
the kids,
kind of hard to read. Yeah.
Up to the kids, down to the parents, out to the siblings, or something like that. Where an attorney kind of explained it to me. She says it's up, down, and then out.
That is a great way to explain it.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have to open an estate account if the only money that could be considered estate is in a joint checking account with the deceased and the executor?
You should, because you don't want to intermingle those funds. Because if the executor is a party to the account, they might have their own money in it, and you want to keep the estate money completely separate.
Okay. If relatives dies with no will and no resources, but they do have debts, what is the obligation of the relatives to settle the estate?
They don't owe it. If the estate doesn't have money, those debts don't get paid.
Okay.
Now, that does not include the IRS. I'm not as sure about the IRS. If there's a house or something, the IRS might be able to put a lien on the house. I know just a tiny bit about tax law. So I'm not sure about past due taxes. Any other debts, they don't get paid. You explain to whoever the creditor is, they had no assets.
If a parent passes away that never filed an over 65 exemption, is the estate still considered or to be eligible for a refund for those 2 years that they can go back and claim?
So it kind of depends on when they passed, from what I understand, because if they passed away recently, or rather, if they passed away more than this year plus 2 years ago, and they had the over 65 or they were supposed to get the over 65 exemption for those years prior to that, I don't believe that they would be able to get the exemption for those years, because that at that time it's already past that limitation that they have, that they're able to go up to those 2 years past this current year. So it depends on when they passed away, when they turned over 65. Normally, whenever they're applying for that exemption, it has to be applied for by the person who is receiving that exemption. So I'm not sure if that's something that would be eligible for, and that really would be better suited for Ms. Mabel or someone who works with exemptions in the appraisal district, because while it would have been applicable if they had applied for it and had it prior to their passing, I'm not certain that it would be applicable for them if they never applied for it in life. So that's something that would probably be better suited for the appraisal district to reach out to and to verify that information. Because normally, like I said, when you're filling out the application for that over 65 exemption, you're having to sign the form as yourself applying for these exemptions and provide a form of identification for your current address. So if they're not currently living in that property, I'm not sure if you can apply for it, because it would have been for previous years in which you're no longer inhabiting that property. So that's definitely a question that you might want to shoot over to the appraisal district on their contact us website form that they have, or give them a call, or if you feel the need to go into the office to go and speak to a representative that can assist with exemptions. That would definitely be something that you would want to confirm with them. But that's the way that my mind is thinking through it myself.
My guess, Mabel would be the expert here, but my guess is you would not be able to get that refund, because Shay is absolutely right. When you fill out the application, it's the person who lives in the home who's filling it out and signing it. And you have to send a copy of your ID and utility bills to show that you currently live there.
Yeah, and that's how I figure it, because of the way that their process works. I don't believe that there would be a workaround for that, because in order for you to apply for it, I believe that you have to be living in it at the time that you're applying for it. And that I could be entirely wrong, but it is something that you would want to confirm with the specialists that is in regards to. So
absolutely,
please feel free to reach out to the appraisal district. And if you find out what it is, I'll try to remember to ask Ms. Mabel next time, because I've never heard of the question before, but it's an interesting one for sure.
We always get them, but every month there's always a new one.
There's always something new.
There's always a new one.
Something interesting.
Well,
I actually had a question for Ms. Mabel too, and I didn't get a chance to ask her before she had to leave. So next time.
And for those of you, sometimes it can be difficult to get through the appraisal district on phone because they are incredibly busy. If you go to their website, hcad.org, there is an email, and it's a general help email. It may take a few days for them to answer, but they do answer, and they are extremely helpful.
They are.
If someone does not list a beneficiary on like a retirement account or something like that, what's the process for for the distribution if there's no beneficiary listed?
I'm so glad somebody asked this. I always need to remind people, please make sure you have good beneficiaries on all your accounts. Check your beneficiaries every so often. If there is no beneficiary listed, it has to go through the probate court.
Mm-hmm. Someone had the question about reverse mortgage, but that was a different presentation altogether. So that question isn't, I can't address that one here.
We have a separate presentation on reverse mortgages now, and if you missed it, it's probably on our YouTube channel.
It is on the YouTube channel, and that one was on March, actually this month, on March the 4th. We had that one. So if you missed that one and you want the presentation about reverse mortgage, just shoot me an email and I'll send you the link out so that you can go back and watch that as well. Okay, tax liability for inherited property. You already got that one. If your property has a tithe, what is the tax basis for the inheritor? Is there in property tax in inheritance? If there was a tithe that was on a property, what is the tax basis for the inheritor? Is this a new step? I don't know what that question
They're
really
talking about, and I don't know enough to answer the question, but if you inherit a home, you get a step up in basis so that you don't have further tax liability.
That's what it is. It says, is it a new step up basis? I didn't know what that
My
meant.
guess it would be, and this is not a terrific answer because it's been many, many years since I had my tax law case. My guess is it would be the same as if you inherited through a will, because you do not own that house until the person passes away.
What does step up basis mean? What is that?
I didn't know I was going to have a final exam.
I mean, you knew what I meant when I said it, so I'm like,
I know what it is, but I'm having trouble coming up with a definition. It's the way it is valued. So I know I'm going to look it up if you want to go to another question, so I answer it correctly.
Okay. If the deceased that did not have a will and inherited property. Okay, so you went over the affidavit of heirship.
Yeah.
About passing without a will, so that was that one. And legal obligation.
And I have the answer for step up in basis.
Okay, so we addressed all the other questions then that were emailed. Okay.
A step up in basis is a tax provision that adjusts the value of an inherited asset to its fair market value at the time of the owner's death. This is to do with capital gains taxes, which I don't think would apply to too many people here. But if capital gains taxes are taxes when someone taxes having to do with a higher income. So any appreciation, so any rises in value during the original owners would never be taxed, and the new owner would have the value as of the date of death, not the original value, so they wouldn't have to pay for any taxes during the original owner's life, any advances in value.
If the beneficiary were to inherit from someone's estate, property or whatever, do they have to pay an inheritance tax?
No, there are no inheritance taxes are unconstitutional in the state of Texas. In the US, federal inheritance taxes right now, it's more than 15 million. I can look that up. It
went up because I think it was like 12.5 something or whatever last year.
That's probably the same as last year, but I'm checking.
But either way, if it's not,
has absolutely no estate taxes.
So if you're not inherited more than 12 million,
it's 13,990,000 is the estate tax, federal estate tax.
So if you're not inheriting more than $13 million worth of assets, then don't worry about it.
You're good to go.
All right. Okay. So if you guys need more information, when we talked about property tax or people that had deferred property taxes, if you ended up not paying the tax bill and you go into a property tax foreclosure, we did have a property tax foreclosure presentation that was on the 26th I'm sorry, the 27th of February. So I do have a recording of that from with Lone Star Legal Aid, talking about what that process is for foreclosing because of property taxes. Someone had the question about the reverse mortgages. We had that presentation on March the 4th. So I have a recording of that one as well. On the 27th of this month, we have our regular mortgage and reverse mortgage foreclosure presentation. So if you have questions in regards to repayment of reverse mortgages, and if it ends up in foreclosure, what that process is. So that's on the 27th. Or if you inherit a property that you cannot pay before it goes into foreclosure, you might want to tune into that as well, because if you inherit a property from someone that actually still has a mortgage on it, the heirs are still responsible for paying the mortgage. So, or getting it refinanced. So we talk about that in that presentation. If you want more information about property taxes, valuations, and protests, and other payment options, we have that presentation on the 26th of this month. So you can come back and join us for that. The schedule of the workshop for the remaining of the month of March will be sent out to everybody so that you guys can come back if you want more information about any of those. So know that when we kind of put our schedule together, that a lot of majority of all of these workshops are all relative, and one kind of came out of another. So it was information about, we were doing will clinics, but people needed more information about why they needed a will. So we started the wills and estate planning presentation. And then after someone actually passes, they had questions about what happens afterwards. And then there's now the probate process and inherited property. And then, property taxes, when somebody owes property taxes, what does that look like? So now we got that part. First time home buyer education, trying to become eligible or credit ready. So we have a financial preparedness workshop, and then home buyer education workshop. And all of our workshops are interchangeable and kind of are, again, relative to each other. So if we don't have a workshop that you guys have more questions about or need additional information about, or you find that there's something new that's relative to what's going on in your particular community, please feel free to reach out to us or give us your feedback. Because again, Ms. Lisa said, we definitely love and need the feedback from people in the community. That's the only way that we know how to continue what we're doing, or how to change it up, or what have you, or to know what to actually offer into the community. So there's a link that will pop up on the screen following this presentation or when you log out. So if we could ask you guys to complete the quick survey, it's only like, 5 or 10 questions, and you have the opportunity to put whatever other comments in there that you'd like, or if there's something that you want us to see us to do, then definitely reach out to us and let us know. So we definitely could not do this without you guys' participation. And I've held you 30 minutes over what our allotted time was. So I do want to be respectful of our presenters and you guys' time. So we want to thank you guys very much for staying on this long to actually to be available to answer the questions. We definitely appreciate that, and appreciate you all for tuning in to even get the information still as well too. So apparently there is definitely still a need. What we're doing is still working, because people are still here and they're still coming back and they're still asking questions. So we know that it is definitely necessary. Ms. Natalie, thank you for joining us and welcome back. Ms. Ernest, thank you very much for coming back. We appreciate you guys. Ms. Mancha, we see you back on here. And since we used to be out in person, we would know people by face. Now I only kind of recognize the names on the screen. So it's great to see you guys back and continue to come back. We thank y'all very much. Again, a link of this recording, all the resources will be sent out. Part 1 of the recording from last week about wills and estate planning and how do you create your own will, how to create your own TOD. I will include that link of that recording, as well as some of the templates that we went over as far as an affidavit of heirship. I don't think we talked about the affidavit of death after the TOD.
Oh my gosh. If you inherit a house through a transfer and death deed,
yeah,
you need to file an affidavit of death.
Okay.
It's so very simple. You can find it on texaslawhelp.org.
And I'll include that toolkit for the TOD. We're trying to have our TOD clinics at least once a quarter. So we'll keep you updated on when we have our next TOD clinic for you guys to get your TOD reviewed and notarized for free. But whatever's going to be, whatever's going to be coming up that's available to you guys that can kind of keep you, save you as the most amount of money as you possibly can without having to go through that probate process. Because again, people don't know hiring the attorney to do this stuff for you is the most expensive and the most time consuming part of all of this, and having to go through them to get things done. So unfortunately, again, you can't represent yourself in probate court. You have to hire an attorney. So if there's a way like a Todd or payable on death accounts that can keep you out of probate, or save you the most amount of money as opposed to going through probate, then we want to make sure that we provide that information to you guys. So with that being said, thank y'all very much. We appreciate you. Thank you for, again, continuing to come out. Ms. Lisa, thank you very much. Ms. Shay, thank you very much. Ms. Mabel, thank you very much. And I know she's gone already, but hopefully we'll see you guys again next month. Again, continue to take care of yourselves, stay safe, and we will see y'all next time.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye.
Really appreciated the
you.
great questions.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.